Hi, I'm Victor Santiago. I'm the Family Recruitment and Community Engagement Worker at Family and Children's Services of the Waterloo Region here on Bonn Park today to talk to you about fostering. If anyone today, listening really feels inspired that, fostering is something that is right for them, it's really easy. All you have to do is visit fosteringkids.ca. And we have tons of information there. You can find out how to get in touch with a worker. You can fill out an inquiry form and we'll get back to you. You can always just bypass that and just give us a call. Our number is there on our website. Again, it's fosteringkids.ca. Thank you.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Do you enjoy Bonn Park Podcast?
If so, we would really appreciate it if you
Leave a review,
like, rate, subscribe, but most importantly,
share directly from the platforms
with your family and friends. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, and more people will get to see our show that way. So click those like buttons and share our show. Thank you.
Thanks.
On with the show. This is it. We are supported by Little Scholars Childcare. Are you an infant, a toddler, a preschooler? If so, aren't you a little young to be listening to podcasts? More importantly, do you enjoy having fun with friends? Who doesn't? What if I told you there's a place in Cambridge, a colorful place with toys and musical instruments and nice people, where you can play with friends all day? Did I mention there's an outdoor playground there too? Sounds great, right? Okay, kiddo, here's what to do. Tell your grown-up about Little Scholars Childcare and how fun it sounds. You should also tell your grown-up that Little Scholars has unique programs for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And this is important. Tell them that learning from Little Scholars' award-winning academic programs and planned activities is all part of the fun you're going to have. Mention there's fresh organic meals too, and music and dance and French language programs. Oh, and tell them there's a webcam so they can see how much fun you're having at Little Scholars while they're stuck at work. Can you remember all that? It's all at littlescholaschildcare.ca. We are supported by Alouid Alternative. Looking for a safe learning environment for your teen? A place where they can feel like they belong? Alouid provides an alternative to mainstream high school with a learning community that helps students find their own way to be successful in both life and learning. Alouid's program is for teens that aren't thriving in the conventional classroom. They offer a safe space for students to become active, self-motivated, lifelong learners. This self-directed learning program combines both remote learning and experiential meetups. An educational plan is created for each member and is based on a teen's interests, strengths, and academic goals. At Alouid, students become masters of their own education. There are many ways to learn. Find the way your teen learns best. Find more at alouidalt.com. ALIUDALT.com. We are supported by Better Bedtime. Sleep is an essential need for good living. All animals sleep, but lots of humans, unfortunately, do not sleep enough, and their mental and physical health suffer as a result. Better Bedtime is an award-winning full-service sleep consultancy based in Waterloo Region with programs for infants, children, adults, and even organizations. Their experienced team learn about your lifestyle and walk you through simple, sustainable changes to create quality sleep habits. Through a preliminary evaluation, live consultation, sleep tracking, and ongoing coaching, you will get better, more revitalizing sleeps. The benefits of sleep are well known, as are the negative effects of not sleeping enough. You owe it to yourself to have a better bedtime. Check out betterbedtime.ca. All right, Victor Santiago, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're very excited to talk to you. We want to talk about some important stuff, which we feel like we're going to be learning. This is our first time meeting you, but I got your contact through a friend of mine who actually fosters children. And I've always thought, man, that is a special family that takes in these kids and does well for our community and is part of that process.
Right. So my role is called Family Recruitment and Community Engagement Worker. And really what my role is to work with the community, work internally, externally, to do the best that I can in order to bring folks to the front door with the goal of supporting our families. So primarily fostering, right? So bringing potential foster parents to the door. But it could also include, volunteers, and also, letting the community understand more about the role that we do in terms of kin supports as well, which we can get into later. So the term kin will come up quite often in this conversation. But yeah, so my role is really to bring families to the front door that can support our families, basically, with a real focus on the foster parents.
So there's a major need for families to foster in our community. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think I want to really kind of maybe start back a little bit on just how special foster families are and why foster families are so important. And then I think it'll make a little bit of sense in terms of why they're needed, right? So I want to start off by saying that, actually, you know what? I'm going to ask a question to both of you right now.
Sure.
If I were to ask you, out of the families that we work with, what percentage do you think of those actually come into care?
Okay, I'm going to say 30%.
30%? What about yourself?
I thought less, like 20%.
20%. So actually the number is 3%.
Okay.
Yeah. So really our goal is always that family first approach. So what we really want to do is, the last thing we want to do is take a child out of their primary family, right? Our focus is always to support families, work with families in order to do that. And when we then look at options, we're saying, okay, maybe the child needs to, be outside of the primary family home. We actually look at kin. So most of the children that we work with that are outside of the primary family, they actually get to stay with kin, which could be grandparents, aunties, cousins. It could also include close family friends. So the child remains actually within their network, right? They're within their community, often within their network. They're with family, and really children do great when they're obviously still within that network, right? However, when we look at fostering, foster parents are just such a critical role in our community, because they are that last line of defense where we have a child or a youth coming in and they can't stay with kin. They can't stay in the primary family. So then there's these amazing folks called foster parents who really step up, and they don't just take care of the child. It's much more than that. So the role of a foster parent is obviously providing that safety and stability for the child. But what they also do is they play a critical role in the community, because we actually encourage our foster parents to really work with the primary family, be it as a mentor, a support, in order to really get that child to return to the family. Because family reunification, keeping families together, is always our goal. And foster parents are a key part of that team. So they're the ones who are with the child the most. And they're the ones who can really build that connection with the primary family and work together to see, okay, what can we do as adults to do what's best for this child? And I'm always so impressed when I speak to foster parents, and honestly, it just warms my heart when I hear about them. They'll go out of their way to really do what's best for the child, and that also includes supporting that primary family. So it could be, maybe the mom of the child, right, doesn't have a car, right, and so the primary families, I've heard of foster families going and driving mom to a job interview, or picking them up on the way for access visits and things like that. So really doing what's ever possible to support them, because the goal of every foster parent, because fostering is temporary, right? So fostering is a temporary solution. So really the foster parents, their goal is, how can I get this child, to return to their primary family as soon and as safely as possible, right? And what we also see, which is great, is that many foster families actually stay connected to the primary family. So when the child goes back, right? So I've spoken to foster parents, and they say, yeah, I get monthly calls from the family. I see what, how things are going. I'll sometimes come in and babysit, invited to birthday parties, we still stay connected, right? So having foster parents in our local community means that, our local families are facing hard times, or, they're in a very vulnerable situation, have that local support of a foster parent to help them. So it's not just to support the child, but it's also a support for that primary family. That's why it's so important that we have foster parents.
Yeah, I've always been so amazed that there are foster parents out there. I think about when you're a parent and your children are young, for example, you feel kind of maxed out and overwhelmed and just kind of going day to day. And I guess these families that are out there that, first of all, have some of their own kids or kids, when they make this decision that this is what they want to do, I guess they're in a place where we've got a lot of love and we've got space and time and energy. And although I guess it's a bit of you're rolling the dice every time you do it, they figure we can do this. And I think that's amazing. There are people out there who actually come to that conclusion that they can do this.
For sure. And I mean, and again, going to the question of why we need foster parents, it's one of those things where when we look at, is there ever a number where we can say that we have enough foster parents? And I would argue that no. I would argue that we are always going to be recruiting foster parents because the reality is that, different families there's different factors in every family, in every foster home, and with every child or sibling sets that may be coming into care, right? So when we look at that, so if we have a very wide array of foster parents throughout the region of Waterloo, right? And then if we have a child coming into care, the more families we have, the better we can match, right? So that could include things like the child staying in their local school, right? It could mean, a term we can maybe discuss later with that cultural safety piece, right? So if a child coming into care is Black, right? If they're able to stay with a Black foster parent, right? That can provide some of that cultural safety for that child, right? So the more foster parents we have, the more variety we have, the more we can do, successful matching, and the better it is for both the foster family's experiences and for the child primarily, right? So we're always going to be looking for foster parents.
This part that you said about how foster families, foster parents are supportive to the family of the children also is it's just in essence community building, which I know you mentioned community already, and we talk about community a lot on this podcast and how getting involved in and giving to and taking from, et cetera, is the key to all of it. It's not, a center that you build or an event that you plan necessarily, but it's talking to your neighbors or supporting that family to take a child in and give that kind of support and security, but then to also go that extra mile and support the family is probably a newer concept to maybe our listeners, right? Where you think, okay, this is like this, I'm doing this piece, I'm going to take care of this child, they'll come and assist me with the child, et cetera. Like here's the next steps in the process. But to have that trust and faith for families to work together, that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I can understand where listeners may be coming from because, back in the day, it was very much so, the foster family wouldn't see the primary family, right? It would oftentimes for access visits, say at our agency, it would be, a volunteer driver would take the child from the foster family's home to the agency, and then the volunteer driver would bring them back to the foster home, and the foster parent would never interact with them, right? So looking back, I mean, we've learned a lot, right? And we really look for example, for those access visits, right? That can be a really hard time for a child, right? Or for a child or for a youth, right? Because A, depending, and then B, when they leave, right? They're leaving again their primary parent, right? Their primary family. So what we really encourage is foster parents to drive their child, the child that they're caring for, to the agency and back. Hopefully, best case scenario, right? They get along with the primary family. They can work with them. They can have a nice chat, right? And they really can come to that consensus that, hey, we're all adults here trying to do what's best for the child. And so that change, I think, is something really positive. And I think for the child, it's just better to know that, the parents that are caring for them and that care about them, they get along, right? I mean, I think that's a key thing, right? You don't want a child to be in that conflict of whose side should I be on, right? It's we're all doing what's best for the child.
And for first-time foster parents, what's the process? What in terms of from the very start? I guess they send a message to say, "I think we'd be interested in doing this." And what does that look like?
Yeah, so for folks who are really interested in fostering, there's various ways they can get in touch with us. So, I mean, the first one is they can call into our agency, and we always have a recruitment worker who's on duty who can, answer questions and, depending on how that call goes, maybe even start an application process for them. Alternatively, though, we also host monthly foster parent info nights, which we're doing virtually now because of COVID. And basically, folks will come on to a Zoom call for about an hour and a half. We give an overview of the work of the agency, who we are, what can they expect during, fostering. Again, very brief. It's like an hour of that. And then we do about half an hour of Q&A. So those are usually decently well attended. So every month, we have around, I would say, between like 10 to 20 folks on the high end who participate in that. And that's done by our recruitment workers as well. I'm there, but just as tech support. And then so depending on where those conversations go, the next step is when they fill out that application, a process starts. There actually is a training program for foster parents. So pre-COVID days, it was in person, so 3 hours once a week for 9 weeks. Usually it was done in the evening, so say like a Wednesday evening for 3 hours. And that training is really, just giving kind of foster parents, I would say that kind of some of the tools that they really do need when receiving a foster child, working with the agency, and then from that point, once they've passed that training, they need to go through what's called a SAFE study. So the study basically looks at really just looking to make sure that the home is a safe place for a child, making sure that there's stability in the home, and once all that is done, they are then good to go with fostering. So we really try to do a nice handoff. So they work with a recruitment worker throughout that kind of onboarding process, and then they would then go on to our placement coordinators. So we have these two lovely ladies who are our placement coordinators, and their job is really to kind of look at that family and say, okay, these are the children that I need to place. These are the families that we have. Who would what would be the best match for them? So they would really work with families on that. And foster families can be very, can be selective, right? So we can have foster families that say, you know what, because of my, I work, because of my situation, say, for example, we have like a single parent, right? Single parent, single family household, they work. So what's best for them is to foster a youth, right? Mm-hmm. So then we know that, okay, so this person fosters, ages 12 plus, 14 plus. And so then we know, right? So it's not that when you become a foster parent, you need to be open to all ages and everything. And we also take a look at, for example, do they have children in the home? How much space do they have, like in terms of bedrooms? All of that stuff gets taken into account. So we really work with each foster family because each foster family is different. And we always look at it at the individual situation at the time of placement. So, yeah.
So if you have an infant, for instance, that's going to be a different family setup. And then part of that selection process is really where that cultural safety factor is going to come into play, right?
Yeah. So ideally we have a situation where, if, and the reality is, and I think it's been out there that really Indigenous, Black, Latinx, and 2S LGBTQIA plus youth are overrepresented in care compared to the general population. So when looking at new foster homes, like these are groups where we're really needing those homes again for that cultural matching piece. So obviously, if we have a Black child coming into care, if all that is an important factor, right? And if everything matches up, great. If we have a Black home for that child. Although, if we're in a situation, which we often are, because we don't have enough foster homes that match, our overrepresented populations, we do have supports in place that really can support those foster homes with those pieces, right? So I'm just thinking right now, if we have a child who is Black placed in a white home, for example, there's supports. So there's teams that can support them with even things like how to provide proper Black hair care, where, what products you need to buy, perhaps, depending, what foods, maybe some recipes, things like that can help support that family. And really the foster parents that we bring on board are awesome folks. And they really come in knowing that, and that they need to be open to the fact that they may receive a child that that's, Black or Indigenous, and they receive training on that. There's mandatory training for foster parents in terms of better understanding, the legacy of residential schools and all that. So it's called our first contact training, and just understanding that legacy of intergenerational trauma. So foster parents receive training on that. And also there's supports for foster parents who are caring for Indigenous youth and making sure that there's that cultural safety piece there. So we do our best really to support all foster families in order to provide that safety if we don't have that exact match.
We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsors. We are supported by Crowsfoot Smokehouse. There's something to be said about tradition, quality, and community. Located in the small farming town of Conestoga, Crowsfoot Smokehouse stands on what is known to be one of the oldest venues in the region. Settled by Mennonites and German immigrants in the 1820s, the site has had a centuries-long tradition of serving great food in a comfortable and welcoming atmosphere. From Ontario pork schnitzel, cabbage rolls, and Nashville hot chicken to mouth-watering smokehouse platters, brisket, and bourbon pecan pie, Crow's Foot Smokehouse's locally sourced menu combines the community's rich German culture with classic Southern-style smokehouse barbecue. Crow's Foot Smokehouse also has an on-site general store stocked with a wide selection of locally made products and artisanal goods, eco-friendly cleaning products, as well as all your daily essentials like local eggs and milk. Visit crowsfootsmokehouse.ca or follow them on Instagram or Facebook. Save 10% online from December 17th to 20th, 2021 with the promo code CROWSFOOT10, all caps, CROWSFOOT10. We are supported by Grand River Hospital Foundation. Ongoing compassionate support is the foundation of the continuum of care at Grand River Hospital, with health professionals from across disciplines coming together at the Freeport campus to provide patients with specialized treatment and care. They help aging and recovering people stay healthy, care for those with chronic and complex conditions requiring specialized services, provide rehabilitation therapy after illness or injury, and offer palliative care to support patients and families going through the end of life. No matter where on the continuum your healthcare needs fall, Grand River Hospital will be there to provide you with the best possible care every step of the way. Donate today and make a difference for patients at Grand River Hospital. You can support the continuum of care by visiting careatfreeport.ca. And now back to the show.
And what was your journey into this role? I imagine there's not a lot of kids out there that are there and think, I'm going to work for Family and Children's Services one day, right? It's something that has, you've been introduced to something, or your education takes you into this role.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I often think, how did I end up here? So yeah, just to give a bit of context. So I first went to school and I did biology at the University of Guelph. Then I did public relations at Conestoga College, and really I was working in scientific communication. So I was working for the Public Health Agency of Canada. I then was based out of the Netherlands for 3 years working for a genetics company. So doing that marketing communications work. And then I would say there was a particular summer. So they sent me down to Chile for the genetics company, and we were going to open a big factory down there. And basically in my role, it was meet with the Mapuche people. So they are the indigenous people of Araucanía, which is a region in the south of Chile. And they said, see what can we do to earn their support. There's a long history there with the Mapuche, where basically they're very independent people, and I love it. If you do not gain their support before you build something, they will burn it down. So
get out of my neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. And rightfully so, considering the history. So,
for sure.
In terms of my history, on my father's side, we're Peruvian background. My grandmother was, an indigenous woman. She was an amazing teacher of many things that I carry on to this day. But I never really kind of gave much thought to my indigeneity really at this point. But literally when the company sent me down to negotiate, I was like, oh my goodness, this feels like colonization. Let me bring trinkets and promises so I can do stuff on your land. And it just, it didn't sit right with me.
That was a perfect noise. You
A
real aha moment, but it sounded like,
It was my aha moment for that. And then that summer, I ended up my best friend ended up moving out to Alberta. and his fiance. She's a professor that does a lot of work with the local Indigenous community. And yeah, we went out there and spent time with, it was in Musqueam First Nation. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I mean, this is, and I felt that connection. My grandmother had passed away at that point about 2 years before. And I was like, oh my gosh, like those lessons are all coming back to me. And I'm like, I need to do better. And I started looking, and this, I was reading this job description, and it was, addressing, it was talking about child welfare, which I know overrepresents Indigenous folks. I had come into the interview again in a position of like, I have a good job, but let's see what happens. So I was very relaxed in the interview, and we were talking, and there was a real focus in the interview of like, hey, we have overrepresentation of Indigenous folks in care, like a huge overrepresentation. And this is something we really need to address. We're committed to this work. And I was just like, yeah, you know what? Like, working in the private sector, great, got to travel a lot, make good money. But I'm like,
but my soul was being crushed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I said, like, well, you know what? Like, let's see where this takes me. Right. So it's been definitely a big transition. Like, I went from being part of this like big marketing team, millions in budget for marketing, to literally in my team, I am like the only marketing guy, kind of doing this work and building this up. But it's honestly just been super rewarding in the fact that I know that the work that I'm doing is doing good for my community. Like the work that I'm doing is really, like feeding my soul, like really. And I work with folks that are just so passionate about the work that they do. And especially when I meet these foster families, and I'm just blown away. I'm just how amazing they are, how selfless they are. And just being part of building that fabric in my community, I think, it's something I just feel really lucky I was able to fall into. So, that was a bit of a spiel, but
no, it must feel really great to go to work, and all of you don't question it. You realize you're doing really important work, and you can just get on with what you need to do. Like there's no questioning. That's incredibly important work you're all doing.
For sure. Yeah, no. And I would say that like my colleagues are passionate folks to be in that. And, and I especially take my hat off to, to like child welfare workers, who are doing, I almost say like I get to do kind of like the fun side of things, because I get to do, I get to talk, to folks like you and, be out in the community and talk to these amazing foster parents who, want to help and do this work. But I work with my colleagues who really see, the reality of our community, that there's a lot of vulnerable children out there, right? That we may not know about until we hear about it, right? I can honestly tell you, I have lived in Waterloo Region since I was 10, and just working there, like I never really gave a thought to child welfare, to the agency I work for now. I didn't really realize that, this was an issue here, right? But then when you kind of work there and you see like, oh, this is the reality of our community, right? You're not in that bubble anymore, and you see that, but then you also see that good side, right? The folks doing the work to kind of break the cycles of trauma, work with children. You see youth, achieve amazing things. It's nice. So it's the double sides of the coin, but something that you wouldn't see being in your bubble, right? So it really popped the bubble for me, but I'm glad it did. So currently right now, our foundation, the Family and Children's Services of the Waterloo Region Foundation, is doing their the Chime Tree of Hope campaign. And this will be going on throughout the rest of the month of December. So if you'd like to support our foundation, you can visit us at faxfoundation.org. And the work really goes towards preventing child abuse in our community and supporting those most vulnerable children, youth, and families that we work with.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.